Hello everyone. Today's talk is titled Embrace Your Simplicity. And this is an emphasis that a simple man can be introduced to wondrous worlds where the man who is in the complex cannot see. What simplicity is, it is not an idea that is suggesting that you're stupid or you're unaware. There are two types of simplicity. There's the simplicity of the self-aware, and there's the simplicity of that which is not aware of the self, and so is lost in a world where others seem to have voices that dictate lives. When you become aware of your experience, your value of life shifts. Because you see, okay, there's one value where in one mode of experience, in one state of being, I go do something. And then suddenly I see, in another state of being, I can also go do other things. So do you want to get an understanding of your different states of existence and being? Do you want to get an understanding of what you are as life? And have your own self-discovery exploration, and then give a contribution to mankind? Or do you want to follow and be a character in a story and at times be convinced of who you are, but then at times not be so convinced? It's as if when we go sleep, there is no character. We're nobody. We're nobodies. Unless suddenly we are woken up in a dream or something, So, you need to see that when you embrace your simplicity, you are trusting your most simplest and natural design to be sufficient. So in life early on, something that occurred for my life, was that I was bashed by the environment which I projected in my mind to be a very graceful one. So I would do acts of kindness, and suddenly I was bashed, and it wasn't enough, and it was off socially, and so I was being soft, and it was not being wise. It was a stupid thing. Do you get it? Do you see all these things that were communicated from my environment to me? So then I understood that the character seems to have more fun than the simple observance that is just up there before he decides to be someone. And so I go, and as we see, as in my life, what happened was that I avoided simplicity because I thought the complex winners were the right ones. But then life showed me that I was wrong, and that in my simplest ability to observe truth, I was my own clarity. And so when you embrace your simplicity, you're not bothered if someone comes and says, let's say, I don't know, you are, let's say someone comes and tells you you are a fool, And even though you're an honest fool, but let's say someone calls you a fool, someone calls you something, a rebel, whatever, a thief, or whatever, a liar, whatever ideology is thrown at you, you will begin to see that you will develop a mind as a being who is self-aware in your deep self-contemplation, that you will be untouched because you know that your essence is untouchable. You know that is the eternal quality, because everything in the world is temporal, and so my knowing beyond this is my eternal value. So pretty much what I'm saying is that when simplicity got a different voice for me, I went into it at first not so aware, and so even I felt like I wasn't surviving well. And then suddenly I went into simplicity in a self-aware manner, and I realized it was a manner and the nature of my mind and thought which needed to change. So suddenly I became very, very simple, very calm. My preferences faded, and I was completely in any experience, any room I walked into. Before I had my own thoughts, the environment would communicate whatever, And so experientially I noticed that the simplicity of the idea that is you ends where the thinker can't find himself. So if you are assuming that you're a thinker, try to find yourself, and you will see an individual, when it looks around, it becomes more collective. When you see there are other human beings around, you realize, oh my God, I'm a human being too. Do you see this? Man's psychology is very important to never be called psychology again, and to actually be something that takes in experiential data. Data that is just communicated, that is spontaneous and meaning. Let's say imagine. So what that means is when we are not utilizing imagination well and abstraction well because we're not maintaining it. We're calling someone insane and we're rejecting an idea. It's as if suddenly when a light bulb is found in a world where everyone's a candle, they want to put the light bulb in a guillotine, as I saw in a picture on Facebook, you know? We must choose for ourselves how much we want to receive from our experience in this life. And so you need to be aware of your experience. Because in being aware of the experience, you move from associations of being an object of experience to being aware of the experiencer. This is the beauty in meditation and yoga. And anything that leads to transcendental observation. Illusion is the platform where your clarity lies. There are infinite pillars between man's mind and how it can dissolve and manifest into many ways and many realities simultaneously at the same time. Your awareness is so playful that it can surprise you. So what that means is when you realize that your intelligence can surprise you, oh gosh, forget about science. Forget about religion in a linear way. Forget about linearity. Spontaneous knowledge and knowing is coming at you in a way where your mind, if it chooses to just be linear, it's like some guy trying to pick up all the papers on the ground of, let's say, millions of paper that is just falling down, very gently. So he's trying to pick them up on the ground. It's meaningless. Just stand back and observe what's happening and be like, damn, this is some bad office work. So it's very important to recognize that our awareness is a guidance system, and it is up to us to see how much we want to be present in individual consciousness or a collective consciousness that is aware of the individual. So do you want to be just a character in a story who doesn't know who he is and just go in life individually, or would you rather experientially know your vision and then be in life? Because guys, there are lessons you gain through meditation and contemplation and just cognition and realization that it's just powerful. So the concept in Buddhism that there was enlightenment and understanding begins to open more of your world. A simple man finds things that others don't, and his wondrous world's open through simplicity. You would see that there are valuable stories that can show us such deeper meaning. So let me share one with you. A Zen story, which I've shared this before, is that there's this warlord who's just going around killing monks. And so all the monks are running away, and so he goes to one city, and then there's this one monk that's not running away. And so his general comes and tells him, oh, this guy's not going away. So the warlord is like, what the hell? He's not going away. And so the warlord goes to there, and his army's there, and the general's there, and they're all in a cubic formation, all just waiting. And so the warlord walks up to the monk, and the monk from the grass is some old guy, and he gets up. And so suddenly, this man who just came from a reality of stepping off the grass and from a state of peace comes to this warlord, and this warlord from a state of anger and why this guy hasn't run away. And the warlord goes up to the guy and whispers to him, don't you know who I am? And he had the sword in his hand, was on his sword, and he's like, I can have my sword in your stomach in an instant. And the Zen master and the monk comes back to the warlord and says, "Don't you know who I am? I can have your sword in my stomach in an instant." And so pretty much what is very valuable and what is being communicated there is that the monk is saying, I am so aware that I am not bothered by my physical transition. And so the warlord was stunned, that it's as if he had found a human being that knew it was more than its humanity. And so it did not fear it, so there was no reason of killing it, And so who knows what happens to that monk? He either in a Shaolin style fights the whole army, or, I don't know, he just dematerializes into bliss. And the warlord just cries in understanding, I don't know. Anyways, this reality is one that requires your immediate attention and self-awareness. Cultivate self-awareness. Wherever you go, begin seeing how you're aware of life there. Being aware of how your moment is present. Become aware of your moment of being. Because there's an intelligence within your moment of being where as you look at yourself, you begin seeing more out of the relationship of other. So when you thought you had to go study other people's ideas, well, actually no. You really need to study your own idea. And if you develop this style of writing a lot of your ideas and then studying them and then suddenly bringing up new theories, you will evolve your mind because you're working with your in other words, spiraling your conditioning into greater platforms of understanding. So if in your conditioning and you're like, if you wonder, oh, like, gosh, I can't go live that kind of lifestyle in this lifestyle, okay, you don't have to change the lifestyle, but you have to change the depth of perception. So if you're someone who can't get out of your job, it doesn't matter. Go to your job and be so deeply aware of the symbols, imagery, life forms you're seeing. Go see if that tree you have a relationship of an object with it, or you have the relationship of life with it, as if it's living. Do you know? Become aware of what relationship you have with yourself. If you're a person who's moving around, walking a lot in life, when you sit down, take deep breathing and adjust your breathing like the sound of ocean waves and just observe and analyze and see how your state of being is in that state of silence and stillness. You will then, in this dynamic way of approaching many of your static limitations, become limitless because you're engineering as well. So engineers are ones that are beyond prophets, I find, celestial engineers, because these beings recognize that they are the awareness that is bringing manifestation into place. And I believe in the ancient Indian tradition where there is the siddhas and the siddhis and the abilities that these guys have, omniscience is a huge factor. When I read in a book that, nothing, just a human being through yoga could experience the omniscience of everything, I was like, okay, the omniscience, wow. It wasn't, do you know, my mind was blown. Because omniscience meant that I am not only an individual experiencer experiencing all this, I'm a collective experiencer observing an individual object of experience. So when I look out, I see an objective world. When I look at myself, I see a subjective world. When you close your eyes, there's the subjective world, but then the emptiness, in which there is not light, but there is an awareness that if you open your eyes, there is. So man is in many atmospheres and rooms and environments where physically he's seeing reality, and also he has many subjective planes and abstract, subtler planes of the same thing that is being observed. So what I mean by that is, if I put an apple on a table, on one level we have the experience of apple on table, on another level we can suddenly think that apple being the apple where Eden took, from the tree of life or whatnot, right? And suddenly we can perceive that apple simultaneously be taken by Newton as it was taken by Eve, as if Newton also made the same mistake. Gosh, it's like people like apples, So... And by seeing this, you begin to see that there is a depth within your intelligence that will amplify your innate wisdom, amplify your innate knowledge. You would go in realities, you would walk in a room and you will see your presence is no longer, oh my God, what kind of person am I? How do I look when I'm going in this room? Your presence is in how aware you are of your moment of experience. And so you go sit down and actually your awareness is so present in the whole space, in which it's as if you are the whole room experiencing yourself. You have the awareness of the room. And your mind can reach these states simply by knowing that it must accept its simplicity, accept its flaws, accept its fears, and know that it must even accept its death. When you accept death, then your freedom becomes the life that you see. But if you do not accept death and understand death in your own deep existential way, and do not make peace with it, you will feel that after death you are thrown into an anarchy where it is no longer in your hands what happens to you. Do not create illusions in the illusion, because you will only get the first illusion. And so hierarchy is an illusion, but it is also a tool. And so our perception is the gift that gives the gift of any perception. And so that is how there are many conceptions and many social planes of existence. You can observe thoughts, and thoughts can have an experience like body. You know how, like, we say, some people, let's say, they say we are a body that has a mind. And how there's the experience that there's this mind that is running this. We begin to see that as reality's shape begins to shift, you were never the same character to begin with. Your depth in thought is your trust that at the end there is a new beginning. Because why else would man survive in an empty world? And so to see the fulfillment of your world is important. To see the intelligence that we're present in is important. Similar to how my whole body is keeping me here, and it's also keeping in my individual organs. That relationship with the organs man has with the cosmos. You are alive, and you're part of this whole holistic knowing, which is life before life on earth. In life, there's always ability. But as soon as life gets a shape and image, and that existential awareness fades in the sense that you feel you're lost, or you feel you're found in some other form, you will see that idol worship can go only for so long unless you see that there's no meaning in the idea that came out of nowhere and is heard back through the silence. So what that means is when an idea is said, it no longer needs to be said. Very interesting phenomena of the abstraction of thought. Our realization is the search for a realized. And in that you will receive, if you were like the Buddha and you go sit down by a tree and you try to receive life, you will begin seeing that existential intelligence is not lost in a spectrum, but the originator of eternity in what it keeps there. So past lives and future lives and other abstract imagery or unseen imagery or let's say transmissions cannot become so open to you unless you have confronted your whole projection of a life and a being. So in other words, you need to see who you are to a degree where your experience is showing you your transcendent nature, not someone just telling you. In other words, transcendental meditation was, for example, as it was suggested by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, was that to go meditate on your transcendence. And as you do, you become the awareness that is both the creator and the creation in your experience. And so that knowing is beyond both. And so your balance is there because there was never somebody who had to be kept in a way. Eternity never needed to be temporal. And to know thyself meant to know the self to a degree where you went beyond it. As you embrace your simplicity, you are the prophet of the complex. Take no voice that can be taken. Your initiation will be your self-remembrance. You are the guiding principle, and all that is happening to you in any manner, including this talk being heard by you, is just a communication suggesting you as an experiencer. Be aware of your experience and recognize that you need to work in getting comfortable with your own perception and the depth of your perception. For to work with eternity requires to work with yourself and with your forms in eternal manner. And that eternal manner is for now man given very immediately through the spectrum of duality. So the right and wrongs, if you're able to, for example, when you go to do an action, you're no longer just thinking that it's one wrong or two wrong or there's the pros and cons or whatnot. You're just going there and you simultaneously have an awareness of all the potentials of value this can have. And so it's as if like you're an omniscient experiencer of all possibility within your possibility. And so this may sound impossible, but it is only when the last pillar, which is I, literally the letter I, and the word I, that collapses, and so you see that your experience was always direct. The simple man was always there. And there's the story of this Indian poet, very profound spiritual teacher. And this Indian spiritual poet, it's as if at first, let me begin the story like this. These parents take their very stupid son, which they can't do anything about, and they give it to the enlightened master, and they're like, make our son realize. And so the enlightened man, of course, doesn't say no and accepts it, right? And so the teacher is trying to teach this guy, but this guy is too stupid, evidently. So the teacher gives him his clothing. He's like, don't put this down. And, they took baths in ponds or whatnot, right? And so the guy suddenly puts it down and puts it in the wrong place. And so the guru understands that this person can't receive and he can't duplicate what he's saying. And what that means is that he just tells the guy, all right, write these sacred words, these mantras, until I come back. Suddenly his other disciples are around and he's taken, to whatever endeavor. And so after a while, he suddenly realizes, the guru realizes, oh my God, that kid's still writing those sacred words. And he goes back and suddenly sees the kid has written to a point where the pencil is gone. It's as if the pencil is destroyed. And it's as if at that moment that guru gets a lesson, and he goes and hugs that person, that being, and he holds him, and he knows that this being is already realized, because he sees that the intelligence of life is working through that man, that person who was so simply running, and people thought he was stupid. He had such devotion to do it, that devotion to doing an action was the realization of the greater state of man. And so that simple child goes on to being one of the greatest poets and realized beings in India since. I forget the name now. But it's a wonderful story which I first heard from Sadhguru, a very wonderful teacher. And I hope, guys, that we really understand the value in who we are. Because you only have 100 years or so to do it. And once you recognize it, you realize that fear of one reality fading into so doing goes away when you're present in multiple realities, when you're simultaneously existent. My communication is not an individual, it is only individual in its own ignorance. Where I think I know it all when I'm an individual. But when I, as an individual, don't know it all, it seems that the collective is always telling me what I am. And so your consciousness is the brilliance of how your simplest truth is your greatest experience. Much blessings and namaste.